Everybody there?
Yes.
So yeah, then any questions that came up? I mean, Paul, you sent an email. I responded to that. Have you been happy with the answer?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So then outside of that, so any other questions that came up from yesterday? Nope.
I mean, I have a few things I need to practice with the pivot table. Things aren't showing quite the way I want to see them, but it was easy enough to set the query up and get the data back.
Okay, you got the data back, and you got some pivot table set up in some form, but okay, now you basically need to work a little bit through that. Okay, um, I guess that is normal, and that is you need to practice and you need to learn more. And today we will kick it up a few notches from what we did yesterday. And today we'll work a little bit different because the topic that we covered today with PowerPivot gets very, very complex very fast. And I would think that at some point in time I will lose a few of you guys that sit in this meeting today. But I hope I give you like a foundation that you guys can, start working with the stuff yourself. Before I do that, when it comes to PowerPivot, let me also get back to Amazon. And there's always books that you can use. And the guy that actually writes the books on is Marco Russo. He's actually the guy that has written two great books about PowerPivot. There's actually one that is here, the one on analysis services that is on the server side. That may be a little bit too much, but that is if you want to go and do what we do today on the server. And there's one that is very similar to that, but that deals with what we do inside Microsoft Excel. Right, that is this Excel 2013 building data models with PowerPivot. And that is what I'm doing today. This is also a great book to read, great book to work through. And if you comprehend, I mean, I read that like every quarter, like once. I'm like at my second pass, but that is something that really describes in detail what you can do with PowerPivot. Before we get started, a little bit about the software requirements and some version considerations. PowerPivot is designed to deal with the weaknesses of what we did yesterday. When we looked at what we did yesterday, we did like an SQL, queried some data, and we then worked them in a pivot table and made them like pretty. There is a number of shortcomings of that solution. I mean, starting with what I said yesterday, for example, with the data volume. You can only like manage so much data via an SQL query before the query drags down the server. There's only like a million rows that you can actually anyway maximum get into an Excel spreadsheet. The solution is fairly open. It is actually, to a degree, for the user still pretty difficult because you formulate all the data via SQL and via table functions, and you cannot really prepare a report model in a way that an end user can really nicely work with that. And so there's any number of shortcomings. And once you reach that, shortcoming, you need to look elsewhere in how you can build those reports better. And Microsoft recognized that, and the analysis services team of Microsoft is actually like the part of SQL Server. The analysis services team developed this plugin, which is called PowerPivot. And by now, Microsoft has a number of what they call like Power BI. There are like 4 utilities that address those shortcomings or that allow you to make more when you cannot deal with MS Query and pivot tables anymore. When you want to do more, you can use those 4 tools. And at the core of this is PowerPivot. That is actually the most important one. That is where everything gets together, and that is the one that you have to have down first. Now, PowerPivot eliminates a lot of thresholds and is based on one of those buzzwords that is right now running around in the BI world that is called in-memory BI. In-memory BI uses certain technologies and that make very large data volumes very, very fast. So we talk about, when you talk about in-memory BI, you can literally evaluate on like a machine that John and I myself have, we can evaluate easily between 1 million and 10 million rows per second. Right? So you can actually load 10 million rows into memory and you can slice and dice the data however you want to evaluate that, and you get the result on screen in less than a second. Yeah, so that's just like an idea. So there's also then the drop of that limit in Excel of having 1 million rows. You can do more. The next limit that you can actually reach is twofold. The limits that you can reach in with Excel is number one, memory. And memory is only a problem when you run the 32-bit version of Excel. So if you want to work with PowerPivot and you want to deal with larger data volumes, you must have a 64-bit installation of Office. That is absolutely mandatory to work with these Power BI tools. The other thing that you need to keep in mind is that this whole PowerPivot thing came with Office 2010. And our customers run Office 2010 to a large degree. They largely have not deployed Office 2013 yet. And we, when you want to develop for the customer, and I sent you recently a link out for the latest Office 2013 version, you should install that parallel to your existing 2010 version that you hopefully have still installed, so that you can build these reports also in 2010 when you work with a customer that works with Office 2010. Okay. There's also a version incompatibility or a number of them. PowerPivot, for example, in 2013 has a different format. You can actually migrate a report model 2010 up to 2013. You cannot actually migrate it downwards. So when you build something in 2013, you cannot actually provide that to a customer that actually runs on 2010. There's a second issue, and that has to do with the version of Office. So PowerPivot in Office 2013 is reserved for certain versions of Office 2013. Unfortunately, the version that we get free from CSB is not part of them. So in CSB version Office that we get, you cannot use PowerPivot in Office 2013. There's a specific version. You need to have Office Professional Plus or certain corporate licenses. I'm still working with Germany on that issue. And that is probably going to be resolved somehow. It does not affect you, John Bell, I think, because you still have an Office Professional Plus license installed. John Bell?
Correct.
Good. So that is then not a big problem. So these are like some incoming remarks on PowerPivot, and what I have here open is like a spreadsheet that I actually did for Fries. And I just wanted to talk to you quickly conceptually about some of the things that we talked about yesterday and expand that a little bit. We yesterday built a similar spreadsheet where we had a pivot table and we had a couple of charts that we looked at, that was also had a couple of slices in there that we had connected to multiple different things, and had a couple of oops, had a couple of slices in there, and I actually have that open in the wrong instance, I think. So let me close this. And we basically had a couple of slices in there. Let me use another one here, perhaps. Very good. So this one was one from Lilydale. Enable content. This was one, for example, an order fill report from Lilydale that they wanted to have, and that we were working on. And of course, you have here the ability to slice and dice the information, similar to what we did yesterday, right? This has actually like a little reduced data volume, and that looks like a little bit more enhanced. And the important thing that you need to understand with this is what we call in Excel like an evaluation context. And the evaluation context basically says that you build in the background, you build like a report model, and in the context, for example, and you build certain numbers. So for example, there is in a report model always here like a number, let's say here the ordered last or the delivered cases, for example. These are numbers that we define in the report model. And yesterday the report model was actually fairly simple because we actually just defined measures when we set the pivot table. You know, we took a number and put it in and said calculate sum or calculate count. And we had to do that actually when we set up these and drag them over here into the values field. And that is what we call in BI a measure. So you define actually measures, and measures are nothing but numbers that you would like to look at. And these measures get then filtered when you do an actual report. So when you do a report, we basically understand then as a report, of course, different things that we can, for example, here drill into the information, right? And when we then change here the data that we are looking at. And that is what we call an evaluation context, because now the content, the number that is actually shown in each individual cell is changing because we change the evaluation context by clicking on these different slicers here, for example. Right? So when you compare that to the logic that we have in CSV, I mean, you don't have that real functionality, because when we define in CSV variables, in like an analysis program in CSV, you define the variable, but the logic how this is calculated happens when you run that evaluation. And at that point in time, the numbers get calculated. So if you wish, you can say that the evaluation context is basically done when the report runs. And then each variable gets calculated and put is basically created hard-coded in the results, you know, where we present them, whether that is BIS or whether that is a report. That concept goes completely out of the window. That concept goes completely out of the window because now we define here variables that get calculated at runtime. Right? So when we define the logic and the math behind those variables, and then later set the evaluation context when we actually want to do the calculation of these values by putting in the slicers, putting in the drill structures that we want, and so on and so forth. Is this, as a general concept, is that clear to everyone? I want to hear yes or no.
It is to me.
Okay, so that's the important piece. Okay. Now, let's do this. We will do this today like slightly different than yesterday. What I will do is now we'll show you like, first I will show you how you can build these report models, and we start like just with some basic report model. And we will do half of the presentation building that report model and just bolt one on to the run tool system like we did yesterday, okay? So, and I have actually here connected to the run tool system, and I open here Excel 2013. By the way, in the VMware is the proper version of Excel for PowerPivot. It is just the 32-bit version. In the case of Run Tool Foods, I don't think we will have a problem because we looked yesterday, they had about 150,000 rows, which I don't believe create a big issue for us in the on the reporting side. So you will get errors when you don't have enough memory, or it says like use a different version, use the 64-bit version. That basically indicates when you run in the 32-bit version that you run out of memory and that you cannot work anymore. Okay. So now this is a blank Excel spreadsheet that we do, and now instead of actually using here the data tab, you actually install in Office 2010, you install PowerPivot. In Office 2013, it is actually part of the package. And now you have here, a tab PowerPivot. If you don't find that, you can actually activate that in the options. There's actually it's actually an add-in, and there are a number of add-ins that you can have. And here's, for example, the Office PowerPivot for Excel 2013, which you have to have active to work with with PowerPivot. And if you have that, you can actually say here data model, and you can click manage, and that actually opens up this plugin where you can now build your own data model. Okay. So initially the screen is empty, and it is in a certain way very similar to what we do with MS Query, because what we do now in here is we build a similar connection. So I go here and say from SQL Server, I will call this connection, give it a friendly name, again run tool foods, similar like we did yesterday. And that was, the server name was run tool SQL, right? And I use SQL Server authentication, and the username was CSB, and the password was and I save that password here in this instance, and then I look up the database name, and again connect to the CSB database. So that is, I can actually here hit test connection. It says test succeeded, so I'm in, and now confirm that I would like to select a list of tables and views to show and import. That now will give me a list of all the tables that are in the CSB database. Again, we will work with the same tables that we want. There will be like one slight difference, and we'll talk about that concept later, because there's actually one table in there. And we'll talk about that table more. I would always select that dim date table. Regardless of what report you are going to build, you always take the dim date table into that report. There's very little circumstances that you don't need that, but we will talk about the concept of dim date a little later. But now you can actually pick all the data that you would like to have in there. And in this instance, we want to have the views are actually at the very end of this list. So I go down, 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 and then we basically get you to the views. And so I would like to build a sales report. And let's say for that sales report, what would I like to have? I would like to have dim address in there. Are there any important sort groups at Run Tool that they use for addresses or items?
No.
Anyone?
No.
No? So then use category.
Not for addresses.
What?
For items, you might go with sort group 1.
Okay. So then let's take sort group 1 into the report. Then let's take a dim item subcategory into the report. So we want to take those in. So basically you can select those fields, and then we want to have in this report, let's say, just a fact table. And the fact table that we want to take this time, let's say, is our sales history, right? Now, what you can do here is you can actually preview and filter the data. And that may be nice for you because you talk about in-memory BI, and in-memory BI, especially on the fact side, you have a lot of columns that you may not want to use. And they, of course, occupy memory, and they occupy when you refresh the data module, they occupy. So you can actually say preview and filter. It will actually open up a preview snapshot of that thing, and then you can actually say, well, there are a number of fields that I do not want to use. For example, here, I don't know what that is. You see these fields, truck key is perhaps empty. You can actually then just deselect those columns, headquarters, agencies. So you could actually go here through that model and deselect a number of fields that you don't want to have. The more, I mean, if you have empty fields that you don't need, they just occupy memory, they just occupy different other things, contracts. You can actually just take them out if they are useless for your reporting anyway, okay? So here, like material price, I don't know if they have anything in there. It seems not to be. So just go ahead and do that. I will not spend too much time on that. Commissions, they probably don't work with commissions right now. Can that be? Right? They probably don't work with rebates. So I can take all that information out that I don't want to use. So once I'm done with that, I can say now, okay, finish. And now it actually starts importing the data. So this will now take a little, and let me perhaps tell you what's happening behind the scenes. PowerPivot is now fetching the content of these tables and is importing them into what they call a report model. And this report model is compressed. And they talk here about column store indexes. Everything, I mean, the entire model will be kept in memory, and they do that basically by converting everything to integers. That's probably a little technical, but it's perhaps important for John Bell to understand. So everything, every string, everything will be converted to integers, and the numbers, they have then headers, and they basically match what string it is. And that basically compresses the data significantly. So the data volume, the data footprint of the Excel spreadsheet is actually very much dependent on the number of distinct values that you have in the columns. So for example, if you import a column that has the serial number in there, the box, that actually takes more memory than, for example, a value field that contains the item number. Because items a customer may have here in sales only 300 different item numbers, so there are only 300 distinct values. Versus like when you import serial numbers from an SSCC data set, you have every row, every SSCC number has a distinct value. So the memory footprint of the column that contains a serial number is much higher than, for example, the footprint from an item number. Right? That is actually why it is fairly important when you want to like get optimum performance and you want to deal with larger data sets. It is actually pretty important to select which ones you really need in the report and pay especially attention to those to the distinct value rule. That is pretty important. There's also, for example, some people round the numbers. For example, if you don't need 4-digit prices, you can round to 2-digit prices so that the number of distinct values gets smaller. And if that doesn't matter really much for your evaluation, then that is maybe a smart move to do to reduce the memory footprint. Yeah? So the number will basically, when the sales fact history will be about complete when we are actually reaching 155,000 rows. Which are right now in that data set that Run Tool had as of yesterday at least. But data volume really doesn't matter. And the refresh now, of course, here takes a little longer for 100,000 rows because, again, we run via the VPN and transfer that over now. We see basically the data volume that is actually transferring here. So that is actually pretty, I mean, it's still pretty small and it is a pretty slow connection, but you see like about 10,000 rows here. Result is about a couple megabytes. And the VPN connection is just here pretty slow probably on their end. So that we are not getting the results as fast as we want. But I still want to build this model a little bit out using their full set of data, so that again, that I will save this model actually for you, John, so that you can work with that a little bit more. So one also remark as far as when we start connecting the tables. I mean, we import the tables here raw, And similar like we did yesterday with MS Query, we will actually do joins. And we didn't talk about join types yesterday very much, so it's perhaps time to discuss that. Do you guys know the concept of join types in SQL? Probably not. Was basically part of the video sessions that I provided to you in the working with data set of videos, those 6.
I'm completely familiar with joins, but
yeah, you are completely familiar with joins. Okay. The thing with joins is this: when you by default in MS Query you basically talk about an inner join. And an inner join in most cases is actually working well for you. But in some instances, you deal with missing data, and you want to actually even get missing data. The concept here in PowerPivot is technically that it always does a full outer join. So we are done. Data is in. We got 160,000 rows in here that we are done, and we don't need to refresh the data. You see, like in the VMware here, for example, 150,000, 200,000, 500,000 rows, depending on how many columns you do, will be fine. Let's look at the task manager here briefly and look at the processes. And you see this Excel spreadsheet right now occupies about 200 megabytes of memory. Expect that it can go up in a 32-bit environment in VMware to about 800 megabytes. Yeah, at about 800 megabytes memory footprint in Excel, you will get an error saying that you don't have enough memory that you should run in the 64-bit version. And so in this instance, let's say you could still let's say easily have a report model here built with 500,000 rows roughly. That would work fine. So now we have these columns in here and we have them here in tab, and similar like what we need to do yesterday is we need to connect them. We will do that shortly. And before we do this, we want to look quickly at this specific table that we imported that is called dim date. Dim date, the idea of a dim date is essentially that you, a lot of times you want to do like, what you call time intelligence. You want to work with slicers that have month names, years, week numbers, weekdays, I don't know, all kinds of things. And in the Kimball data warehouse that we talked about earlier, it has been defined, or some smart cookie came up and said, well, to do that in SQL, it is actually way easier to set up a table that has related to a date field, which we have here basically on the left side, like a date key, different columns for everything, like everything that is related to the day, so that we know what month it is, that we know the quarter it is, the month name, the calendar year, the quarter, and so on and so forth. So this is basically just a table where I can look up any given day, whether that is a weekday, whether that is what week number that is in, when the month started, when the month ended, lots of information. Okay, and you see here also that there are actually fields in there for fiscal month and fiscal year, and so on and so forth, and these are actually filled from CSV. So when we, for example, generate, there's actually part when we build the BI model, we actually look up in the CSV accounting how the fiscal periods are set up and populate that inside that dim date table. So that, for example, if I would now like to build a report with for Run Tool Foods, that reports based on their accounting periods, I can actually do that, right? So, for example, they seem to be having a different accounting year, right? So, where, for example, then here the August, for example, accounting period starts in, or the period 8 starts in April. Does it make sense to you, Paul?
Yeah, I think the year ends in the fall. That makes sense.
Yeah. So that is, that you can, for example, then you have inside that DIM date table the information for the accounting period, so that you can take an invoice date or you can take a delivery date and report that and connect that to the DIM date table to make reports that run based on financial periods. So now what you can do in so that's that much. Any questions to the idea of the DIM date table? Yeah, there are there's also like options to do other things. We have people that, for example, do like week ending date. I had that case. I don't know where I had that, where I needed a week ending date. Yeah, I needed that for like a week report with Fries, or where I needed a week ending date to calculate the always previous 6 weeks or something like that. So you can actually technically add any fields to that if you need some, but that is a general idea. So at the bottom of the PowerPivot for Excel in 2010, you see actually like these two icons here. You see like this grid view and you see this diagram view. And I would always, when we now connect these fields, I would actually switch to that diagram view to connect now these fields, right? So similar to what we did yesterday, I arrange my my fields here a little bit. And to say I have my DIM item, I have my DIM sort group here, I have my category, subcategory here, and then I have my fact table sales here, so that I move over. So this is actually like very similar to what we have seen yesterday. And what I always do is I put them into like a hierarchy that makes sense for me, you know, because item subcategory, category key, sort group is related to item. Item is then connected to the fact sales history, addresses is history, DIM date is history. So that is all in here, right? So now we just need to connect the data fields. Similar like we did yesterday, we have here like the date field, and I assume that the important date that they use for reporting is the delivery date. Is that correct, Mark? Do they most reporting by invoice date or delivery date?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably by delivery date.
Yeah. So we connect them, just drag and drop, and we connect them. The interesting thing is here with these joins, there are no join types. So we do not have inner joins, outer joins. It is always an implicit outer join, right? It is always an implicit full outer join. There's always that all data will be shown. So if you have, for example, let's say an item key on the left side, and you connect that to the item key, let's say, I mean, that never happens, but let's say there would be the item key would be missing, or you would not have a basic data, the data would still show when you report based on fact sales history. That is, pretty important concept to understand for you, John. So there is no influence that you have in terms of join type, which you don't need because it always shows all data. Right? So you just keep dragging. The other thing that is actually pretty important is you can only have, and that is another, like perhaps pretty big restriction for some people, you can only connect one field to one field. There always is only a one to n relationship. So one, that means you can only connect one field to another field, so you cannot make joins that entail multiple data fields, versus in SQL you can. One of the tables must have distinct values. So you cannot, for example, connect fields that have on both sides of the table duplicate values. So one side of the table in a relationship must have distinct values. So now I would think some questions come up from John. Are you good with that?
I'm good with that. I want to make one thing clear that I think is important. Like, for example, if you have two addresses that link to an order, and bill to, ship to, you would only be able to link one of those to the address master.
Yeah, very good. But now how would you work around that issue?
In SQL, I would alias out the table.
Well, and here you can technically do similar things. So number one is you can actually use the same field and you can actually have multiple connections, but then the second connections will be inactive. So for example, you could actually say address key. I do here like another relation to this table, and that will be actually like gray. And there will be commands that you can do, for example, when you want to retrieve information via certain commands, that you can switch which active connection will be done in a certain mathematical expression.
Okay.
Okay, that is one thing that you can do. So for example, there is a function that says related, and related would, for example, allow me to a ship-to key to look up the name, and you could actually then look up that name and string it into that fact table, and that would allow you to, for example, to get the name. The other option that you would have is actually import the same table again. So you could actually say, I have here now the dim address, and I would actually call that, for example, dim address. And now I actually go ahead and import the same table again, and call it, rename it then, and call it like dim ship-to, and have the same data source twice import.
You're doing an alias at that point.
That is basically then the way that you would do an alias, but it requires you to import physically the same table twice.
Okay.
Right? It's not really.
Is there any downside to that? Because that seems intuitive to me.
What?
Is there any downside to doing that? Because that seems like the obvious good choice to me.
Yeah, this is an obvious choice, and that is actually an important concept. That is especially important, for example, if you use, for the dim date table, for example, if you use the same dim date table for multiple, with different meanings. Let's say you build a report model somehow that has sales data in there, and you want to do something with delivery date and inventory age, right, together. So you import inventory data, and you have a date field which represents the age or manufacturing date, and you have a delivery date. You don't want to then use the same dim date table to connect to the delivery date and to the lot date, because they have a completely different meaning, like from a business perspective. And in this instance, you would also import the dim date table twice and say, well, I rename it and say dim date production date, and then dim date delivery date, and import that twice for the different meanings, so that the user can, really differentiate, and you in your logic when you build the report model further out can differentiate between those two meanings. Okay? We good?
Yeah, and it really doesn't duplicate the data because you're doing rationalization on the import of the first time anyway.
Exactly. You do that, and now you can also work with a report model. Now the thing is, we have now built the model, and you see this is actually now fairly simple and straightforward, right? That is, pretty much all you do in this model view, and then you basically go back into the grid view. Now, with this said, here's now already the big difference. The idea here, for example, yesterday we created basically measures when we went into the pivot table on the right side, and we dragged this field, and we said like make a sum and format that currency, or format that with so much decimals, and so on and so forth, right? So this is what we did yesterday. In PowerPivot, the idea is that you really design that user-friendly enough so that they get presented with the data that in a way that all these things are already predefined, that the user really does not need to do that. So in BI terms, you talk about metadata. You talk about definition of these measures via metadata that defines how people should look at these numbers that you define in the report model. In this instance, the easiest is, we probably only do in the fact history sales table some measures, because this is actually the fact table that contains all numbers that we want to do. And the simplest thing is, for example, that you say, I would like to get like a sum. For example, you would like to go in here and you go to your value net or something, value list, value AK, blah, 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 blah. Value net calc, For example, there should be actually values in there, I hope. So you can always see if there are values in there by clicking on that field. So and the easiest to define a number would be, for example, here via the AutoSum button that you can actually open up, and then you get actually a choice of the standard formula that you want to use. So you can say you want to have with a value, you probably want to have a sum. So it creates now here automatically a measure, and then you can basically say, call that, for example, something else. You can say you want to call this field net sales dollars, right? Net sales dollars. Give it a user-friendly name, right? So have created a measure that I can use that now will be available for the end user to use in a report mode. Now this is like fairly simple, let's say what we want to do is also get like, let's say we want to analyze the average net sales per, let's say, customer. How would we do that? Well, we would, for example, say we want to basically get a measure that defines the number of customers that do that, and we would, for example, say I would like to calculate what is the difference between a count and a distinct count? Does anyone know that?
I would think it counts just the number of rows, and it just counts the amount of unique values.
Exactly. Paul, you are right on top of that. You know, then John Bell probably would have known that too. That is for the others, for example, something that you, for example, would learn by reading their TSQL fundamentals. That is something that is, you know, base knowledge that you understand what the math is between, for example, a count and distinct count. So in this case, we would need a distinct count, and we basically say that one would be number of customers, right? Okay. So now I could say, like, I would like to have another calculation. Let's say I would like to get the average sale that the customers do. I could actually say I would need to calculate this number, net sales. I could actually make a new measure and call that equal, and say take this number, divide it by this number. Oops. Did do something wrong? That's my measure. Oh, measure is gone. We had value net here, right? So let's call that. Where's my field? So let's say average sales, customer sales, dollars would be so I can actually here select the field and can say here was a measure number net sales divided by, and open the bracket and put a formula in and say divided by number of customers. Boom, right? So that is, for example, my average customer sales. So I actually define these variables here now, and I actually average. So make it nice. So you build here certain expressions, and these expressions that you have here at your disposal, they are pretty powerful. They are like about 150 of those, of which I would say 10, 20 of them become really handy, and we will see like more examples of what we can do later. But I guess you get the gist of it. Another example would be, for example, a last date. For example, here's also let's say last order date. So you would like to find out somehow when an item, customer, whatever has been ordered the last time. So you could actually say last order date, colon equal, and then there's a function that is called last date, right? And I can say last date, and then I say here, for example, order date, right? So put that in that function. So this will basically return the last date when something was ordered. So there's an error. Last date, order date. Order date, let's say fact. Fact, sales history DS, order date. May require me to have a full qualified name in there. There you go. So I need to have a full qualified name in there. So in this case, I have to actually refer to the table, which is here fact history, sales, DS, and so on. So this is this, and it knows already that this is a date field. It knows now. So there are other metadata that we can actually manage and maintain here in the report model. For example, number of customers. For example, I can then say I would like to format that here in the model already and say that is a number. And here I would like to actually have a whole number only. I would like to have 1,000 separators on there, so I can format that field. Then we had somewhere the net sales column, the average sales here, for example. I can say this is definitely a currency field. So I can actually define all these metadata already in here so that they look pretty when they are dragged over, and so nobody actually has to do that. So here the same thing. This is actually a value field, format, currency, so I can do that. So what I now can also do is still I can hide those fields. So for example, if I don't want to have people deal with this column, I can actually hide this column. So I can actually go ahead and say basically all these columns if I want to. I can actually hide these. And so that the user basically doesn't even see this model that is behind there. So I can actually say hide from client tools. That basically means the columns are still there and I can work with them, but the end user does not have access to those data fields. Right? They don't even see when they work in Excel that these fields are there. Right? So they basically just work with the numbers that I have actually predefined here and the math that is behind that works here. Another important command may be like related, or you can also concatenate the numbers and stuff like that, similar to what we have seen. So you can actually hide this field, for example. So you can actually spend quite some time in making things pretty, and that gets actually pretty deep because there are also other metadata that the system actually supports in terms of PowerPivot. That you can actually qualify, which makes some reporting later on easier. For example, you can say when you have a web URL in there, I don't have one in here right now, but what I do have in here is, for example, I have longitude and latitude information in there, and I can, for example, here in the day in advanced, you can basically say certain fields and certain categories. So, for example, you can say that is a latitude field, and there are more categories like image URLs and country and region. You can describe the data more so that actually becomes easier for people to work with the data when they build reports with the other reporting tools that Office provides. So that then, this report model is at the heart, and the more time you spend on defining these default fields and the content, the more the people actually know. And this is actually, you see, like a lot of this is actually done automatically by the way that we have built the views so that the system actually detects automatically what is what, right? So this one would be, for example, country region or country. You could actually define, right? Different things. So with this being said, you can spend all day long building this report model. At the end of the day, what you do is you are done, and you go to the home thing, and what you now do is basically say you want to create a pivot table which returns now into Excel. And now you have the same thing like we did yesterday, it just looks a little different, right? So you have here on the right side the tables. And now you see I have just the numbers in there that I've defined. Everything else is hidden for the end user. They just have the numbers in here. And now I can build via drag and drop my report. And here's, for example, now where the evaluation context comes in. Let's say I would like to, I drag now in here. You have seen what we built in terms of expressions. And I just drag in here the category. And then below there, I take the subcategory in there. You see how fast it is, by the way, right? And now we collapse the entire field here, expand, collapse the entire field. So, and now we take the measures in here. And now I have these measures in here that are net sales and number of customers. So when I drag, for example, net sales in here, I get now the value of how much is sold here by each category. When I drag now the number of customers, I get out of that evaluation customers how many of the customers basically bought what they bought. So I have, for example, only 7 customers that bought out of the product category livestock. The last time that this actually has been ordered, I drag that over. I can basically see when that was. And for example, here I can drill in. So I can actually then also in the categories can drill in and can, for example, see that here this subcategory Blue Water Warehouse was the last time ordered at 6/7. So always in the evaluation context, those numbers get evaluated. Average sales, right? Want to get that by year? You open dim date up. You want to get it by year? Select the year, right? Year, let's say, put it on the columns, right? Same thing like we did yesterday. Can now work with slicers again. Can work with other things again. From here on out, everything is standard pivot table, except for the fact that these models here now look a little different. The field arrangements here look a little different, but you do not have really an influence on the way that it actually shows here. You got any questions to that? I mean, you get like the idea of how powerful this is. Because you can, for example, now say, let's say we take the category out, right? You take the category out, and you take, instead of that, you take the customer name in. You just change the evaluation context by looking now at the customer name. You see how fast. We talk here 150,000 rows. So I do collapse the entire field. Now I can, for example, say here, and let's take this one out now, the calendar year out, because it doesn't make any sense. But now I can here, for example, say order sort by. You could actually do sort smallest to largest. So now you would, for example, here say which customers haven't ordered in a while, and since when they did not order. Or you want to clean up your items. You basically take that out, remove field. You take that out. You want to basically see all the items that have not been ordered lately. So you go and just basically say the item description, boop, and then you see basically what items have not been sold in a long time and since when. Basically get a list of orphaned items. You see this? You're so quiet.
Yeah, it looks good. I think everyone has themselves muted for sound quality.
Okay. So, but you got to really understand this. The more power you build into the model, the more you can do. And it gets really interesting. And at this point in time, I think this is like, enough for you as an introduction into this topic. So I will now switch gears a little bit and show you a few examples of what we have done with other customers and what kind of issues we have solved with them, to give you an idea of that. So yeah, everybody good with that? So here, for example, this is actually one example that I actually tried to open earlier, and let me see if I open that one in Excel 2013. File open, data volume, open other workbooks, go to computer, browse, SkyDrive, customer reports, boom. Let's do, start with this one here. So this is actually a report that I built for Price, which is still loading, has a few 100,000 rows in here. And what you will notice in this one, for example, is here let's say, let's look at this one here. You see here I compare a current year versus previous year, so the customer can actually go and click on a year, and then, the data are a little older, but you click on any year and then it compares current year to previous year. But you can also, for example, and this shows right now by month, but I could, for example, also say I take here in the metadata, I let's say take, instead of month, I take like a week number or something. Fiscal week number, something like that. Let me remove this. And so you take either week number. So then I actually do this by week, and it's still actually in the context detects that I now have the same variable and have current year versus previous year, right? So how is this done? In this example, I do have what we is it? There are a number of expressions in there that I did here, and there's, for example, in here the a value that is called calculate. This is actually also pretty powerful. The calculate is actually next is basically the first major expression that you need to learn. That is one very powerful. But here, for example, I say, well, calculate me the value net for the dates between. Out of the filter context, take the dim date, what I have currently, and take then out of that table, out of these dates between, take the first date that you have and add minus 12, which is basically subtracting 12. It's a little odd that it says date add. And take the last date of the current filter context and subtract 12 months, which basically gets me back 12 months. So it calculates me always a sum based on the filter context of the previous year. So when the filter context is week or the filter context is month, it calculates that back. So this is, for example, a fairly complex expression that you could build in PowerPivot for previous year's values, right? This actually as an example, right? So these are also fairly simple. Let me see what else I have in here that is perhaps a little simpler than that. Gross margins. This is actually fairly simple. What I do is, what you can also do is add columns. So you can actually here add a right mouse click and add a column. So you can actually say add insert column and enter a calculated column. Important concept here is that you always work on complete tables. You cannot do a calculation that is like a single row or so. I mean, you would need to phrase the expression. So when you add a column, you enter a formula, you can just do that for the column. So I actually inserted here a column and then say, calculate me the gross margin by subtracting value net minus calculate sales value. And that is then basically, and the sum of that would be then, the sum of that value would be then the gross margin overall. And then I can, of course, put a formula in there that calculates me the percentage, right? So that would be, for example, very simple gross margin calculation. Here, like all these different gross margins that I did. This one is actually pretty interesting because there's basically, they wanted to have actually a rotating report that gives me always the past 5 weeks. So when they actually look at the data, it should actually take today's date and go back and show me the past 6 weeks worth or 5 weeks worth of data. I actually did here like a little trick. So I basically added to the dim date table, I added another column. And that is basically this week begin date. And what I basically did is here's actually a switch statement. I took the ISO date of the week. There's actually a column in there that says 1, 2, 3, and I think starting with Sunday. And then I basically say when, then take day, date minus 1, otherwise take date minus 2, date minus 3, date minus 4, date minus 5. So I basically do a switch statement and calculate basically the week begin date. Right, so that each of the calendar dates has a week begin date, and then in the report model sum of past 5 weeks, I basically say take that week begin date and calculate me the sum of quantity weight. I want to basically get the weight always for the past 5 weeks, and filter by the column dim week begin date, and use today's date minus 42. So everything that is larger, today's date minus 42. So it gives me always a complete weeks of the past 5 weeks. So this is sort of how you could do what we in CSV would call relative date. Right? So this one here is also, that was actually Lilydale, but it's also in this model. What I basically did is Lilydale actually had a big issue with, we can switch, what they call an order fill report. And the order fill report for them was especially important for Loblaws because they get actually penalized for short shipments. And you can do in CSV system very simple, like what they call a quantity or order short report, which shows you, ordered minus delivered. And that gives you like a shortage report. That is a quantity order. But in this instance, we needed to actually get a calculation of the actual line item shortened. And there's more complexity to it because you got to think about, like, for example, when you have order lines that do not have an order quantity but just a ship quantity, they don't necessarily, I mean, they are not really shortened because you just shipped whatever you have, and there's no, it cannot be looked as a shortage. So you got to actually put some math in there that basically says how do you calculate an order short. And I basically did here similar. I first added a column where I said ordered versus delivered, and that column has for me a -1 in there when that is not a shortened line item, and if that has 0 in there, it is also not shortened. But everything else is then the difference would be order quantity minus delivered quantity. So I basically put this expression in here to give me a number, and then I said give me a count for the items that do not have any order quantity. That's just for me to measure, to basically see which how many orders do I have in there that have been shipped without an order quantity. But then, for example, I calculate a count where I say give me a count of the number of line items that have an order shortage, right? So, or give me a count. So this is basically line item shortages, right? And then I can basically calculate the number of line items. So basically the question is how many order lines of those where I had order quantities have been short. You're still with me, right? So they are like, any number of formulas that you can build. It's basically just up to you to calculate the math, right? Here basically it's very similar. I calculate then for the count orders, and here I calculate the count order lines. So where I actually do then a count A of order number on the fact order sales. So there are different ways on how you can do the math, and that really depends on what you want to do. This is actually another good example. In sales history, when you want to calculate the number of returns, for example, you can also use a calculate button, the count. I mean, here the count actually, it doesn't really matter when you do a count which column you use, because it's basically a row count. So I just picked the first one that was in here. So that doesn't matter. But then I say calculate me a count of the field fact history DS return cancel code where it says delivery. You know, we have in each row in CSV, we have basically an indication of whether that is actually a shipment or whether that is a return. Right? So you can actually do this these formulas as you need. Questions? That is one example. John, any remarks from Bill?
No, I don't have anything. Just how much time on average does it take you to set up a model?
I don't need that long anymore, but I mean, I have now, let's say, quite some practice. I mean,
you generally just take one of your existing models. If you're setting up a sales for another customer that you've already set up, you just take that and modify it, right?
Yeah. I mean, technically you can, for example, you should be able to use this Fry's model in general. You can actually take that model and just change the connection inside that model, refresh it against Run to Foods, and it most likely works.
Absolutely.
Right. The problem is, for example, then when the model is not like matching really. For example, when you have with the company dependency and stuff like that, at that point in time you may get issues. Right. For example, if you now would take the financial model that I have and would bolt that on, we would have issues with the multiple account tables they have, because with any other customers that I dealt with so far, we have only one account table, we have only one table with posting modes, we have only one table with, so there may be issues that you need to work through. With a sales model, for example, you can actually use one and that I have existing, bolted on, refresh it and play with it and refine it. And that is normally what I do. But even if I do it from scratch, I mean, we built like just like 5 minutes ago, we built one from scratch, and it wasn't like too earth-shattering to get this like completed, right? I mean, that wasn't like too crazy, right?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't too crazy, but it was nowhere near as polished as your others.
Right. I mean, it is, of course, not as polished, and you spend time on the cosmetics and stuff like that. But you can use some of those, and I can share my Skydive with you. Then you have here, like, I have all my samples actually in here. We just got to be a little bit careful because, I mean, you can use them, but you got to make sure that these samples that we have here don't go out as is to customers, because these are actually real customer data that are in there. Right, so when you basically take them, you refresh them with Run to Foods, it's fine. Then you can send it out to Run to Foods.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, this is actually another example that I had, and that goes like towards the accounting.
One more question.
Yeah.
One more question, Patrick. when you work with the Lilydales and the Fries, how competent are they? I mean, yeah, it depends on their staff. I imagine Lilydale's more competent than other people, but how deep do you target the training?
I can send you some with Fries, for example. I did do a training from scratch. I basically did a similar training session like we do here right now. I actually still have recordings on YouTube. That are actually the live recordings of the 2 training sessions that I did with Fries. And if you want to basically watch those and listen to those, you can do that. But I do the same thing, but it is to the customer eventually to learn this stuff themselves. I mean, this is all like Schulbook stuff. There's like tons of resources out that you find on the web to do that yourself. It's not like rocket science. I mean, the language that we call that you use in this PowerPivot is called DAX, and it goes pretty far, right? So, and you just need to learn these expressions and then go as complex as you want. With what I said, if you have down these the basic functions, I would say the sum and average and so on and so forth, plus this calculate. If you got that down already, you can do already, quite a bit. I mean, there's calculate is, for example, the most powerful expression among them all. And then, as you go, if you need time intelligence functions and you need to do calculations, current week, previous week, you basically work and learn this time intelligence, and you will always, John, you will always be valuable for the customer because they always keep coming back for more and they don't comprehend it really. They can, it is open knowledge, but you need to spend really some energy and time to learn this to make it great. And that is where then some customers basically boogie out and they will always come back and ask for your services.
Yeah, I hear you there. And depending on whether you're talking about a Rental Foods or whether you're talking about a Lilydale.
Right. And Lilydale, I mean, they are by now, they are not asking me anymore. High Life Foods, you put the model in there, give them 2 sessions, they are good. They basically, you introduce them to the concept and stuff like that, they are good. Right? You talk to, Conestoga. I really like the customers that I'm working with after the initial training so far, I do not need to touch them. On the other side, for example, George Otten. George Otten actually did a deal with Becker's, and he's for the past 6 months, he has been there 3 days a week at full charge consulting rate to build different report models that they need. And that's a customer that is about the size of a Rental Foods. It's about the size of a High Life. Just like that they don't want them to build it, or that they don't want to learn it, or they don't acquire the knowledge.
Who is that?
Becker's in Belgium.
No, the first name you mentioned.
George Otten, the other guy that works with us on the SQL team, the Dutch guy.
Okay,
right.
I got you.
So let me show you like a couple more things. Let me show you. Number one, I wanted to show you accounting, and I think I have shown that to you before. But this, for example, is I don't know if that is actually done in 2010 or 2013. Gotta see if that works. Yeah, it actually works in 2010. This is actually now a reduced data set that I have with Fries, showing some other capabilities. For example, when you build such a report model, you can also retrieve cells, right? When you, for example, build a report model, sometimes you would like to really place them on a spreadsheet to do some calculation. Right, and that's what you call what you can do, for example, with a cube value and cube member functions. There's in Excel a function that is called cube value, and that is basically like an expression where you can say, I would like to query the report model, the PowerPivot model, and would like to get the sum of value out of that model with a certain filter, and get me that field and put it into a cell in Microsoft Excel so that I can actually like do other formulas with it. right? So here, for example, I say I have a cell that would be, for example, here the income and the expense, right? I have here a field. I retrieve the cube value function and retrieve a field sum of value for the income based on the setting in the account master that we have in accounting. I have here another field where I actually retrieve based on the code evaluation field in the account master the expenses, and then calculate just the profit by calculating those two cells the difference. Right? Standard Excel. Right? And the cube value functions here, for example, have also then another filter, the slicer, so that basically says, please obey also the slicer accounting year, slicer period, so that the numbers basically filter based on what I actually select. Right? There's also some uniqueness in there that I actually turn in accounting. When you look at the accounting view, I turn actually in the view, I turn the sign, right? I put debit into negative, right? Paul? Do I do debit
Yeah, if you're
negative?
doing a profit and loss statement.
Yeah, I do debit negative, right?
Yeah, if you think a profit is positive, yes.
Yeah. So that is basically why then the numbers basically here add up. So when you look at the model, I mean, this one, for example, is a profit and loss statement balance sheet, depending on how you would like to look at that. When you look at the accumulated data here, for example, it actually balances out. It is a trial balance sheet, profit and loss statement all in one. So I built that model once to have a basic accounting. And this is done, for example, then based on posting data, right? So you have here a full drill down to the data, and it actually also is with consolidation. So you have actually this model has been built for Fry's to consolidate all the numbers, and then you can actually select here in the affiliate company key how you would like, what kind of internal sales you would like to eliminate or keep, right? So that would be like a consolidated balance sheet, and you would actually here have, I would have selected the intercompany sales that would not be. So this is basically a P&L based on that. Actually, I would need to select all the companies here. So this would be now a consolidated balance sheet for Fry's with drill down consolidated throughout all companies. Yeah, so there's some more math, some more logic, and then I mean in this instance I really drill down to the individual build on posting data. So that's that. So that's that. And now finally, let's have a look at, I mean, this is all PowerPivot. I would like to conclude this session a little bit with some new stuff that now came in Excel 2013. And perhaps, what do we do? Where do we do that? Let's do something fun.
Wasn't there been some fancy integration with mapping and things?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And let me turn off the recording now.